Anyone who want to start in DAX, right? You know that there are three types of calculations that you can perform with DAX. Three major objects. Listen carefully, okay? Now, I know that I've got some empty space here. Okay, let me just drag this a bit here. I make use of the empty space here. Okay, I would like to just write out something here, okay? So, number one, okay, is what we call calculated columns. All right. Number two, you're going to have measures. And number three, you have calculated tables. So what I've written on the screen, right? I just type it out. These are the three major objects that you can make use of DAX formulas to create them. And these are the most important, the three most popular objects that people use DAX on. So I'm going to do one by one, okay? Beginning with calculated columns. Calculated columns means that's the usual thing that people will think of. Oh, I've got a table, all right? I want to create a new column. And when you create a new column, they're waiting for you to type a formula, your DAX formula. So after you finish typing the DAX formula, when you hit the enter key, if the formula is correct, it's valid, then the items, okay, the values, the result will be populated across, okay, the entire column. That's called a calculated column. The column results, the column store values that is the result of a DAX formula. Secondly, what are measures? Now, measures, right, it's slightly different from columns. At least, right, what is similar is you still use DAX formula to calculate, but the result is not going to be populated in the table. Okay, in the table, you don't find a new column because that's a column. This is measure. Measure is an object given a name, usually holding the formula, whereby once you hit the enter key, you don't see results yet because it's not going to be calculated yet. As compared to columns, columns are pre-calculated. You see, if I were to do this correctly, okay, here, so columns are pre-calculated, right? Whereby measures, okay, measures here are post-calculated. What is pre, what is post, right? You know, pre is before, post is after, right? So I say pre-calculated as in when you create a column, you write the formula, the column is ready, it's blank, waiting for you to finish your formula. The moment you hit the enter key, all right, they immediately calculate, execute, and run the formula, okay? And all the results will be produced and stored in the column. You see immediately the answer already populated in the column. Okay, compared to measures, you write the formula, you hit the enter key, there's nothing, no answer. Don't search high and low for it. You won't see the answer as yet. The only way when they are going to be calculated, because post-calculated, they calculate later, not now. When you hit enter key, they merely store the definition of your formula. They just hold the definition. They don't execute the formula yet. So when you use the measure, drag and drop your measure, dump it onto your report page, then only they run the formula. And if the formula is correct, they produce a value, right? And display on your visual. Whether you use a card, you use a table, you use a chart, they will then produce the value. So when you learn about these two differences, right, that means calculated columns is an object that is attached to a table because the values are calculated immediately and the values are stored in the column. So when you save your PBIX file, the file size will grow. So the more columns you add to a table in your data model, whenever you save your PBIX file, the file size will grow because values are stored indefinitely part of a data model. As compared to measures, measures only remember your formula. Even after you use the measure on your report, they calculate, they show and display the result only. Nothing is stored. So no matter how many hundreds or thousands of measures you create on your Power BI file, the size will not grow as the same proportion like you add more columns to the file. Okay, so there are pros and cons between the two. But those of you who are not totally beginner in DAX, you could have already started your DAX journey in your work, okay, part of your work, and you could have also done a lot of Googling, okay, Googling and do your own research. I can bet my head on it that whatever questions you ask, you Google, you search for something, all the answers provided from Google, majority of the time you will see people recommend you to create measures. In fact, Microsoft says so. Remember, it's not Gerald who says so. I'm not plucking a reason or explanation from the sky. All right, because Microsoft also recommended more usage of measures compared to columns. But it doesn't mean that use measures is correct, use columns are wrong. No, I did not say that. I'm saying it depends on situations, whether you need a column or not. You need a column whenever. Two scenarios. Number one, you create a column when you need every row in your the records, every row in the table to hold a value. Okay, and the value will be permanently stored there, so that in future you can use it further again in other calculations. Right? That's the reason why you want to store it there, because it's going to be the basis of one calculation. Later on, there are other measure calculations. They can use the column, right? So that's actually a column, because column number one, you need to understand, they use iterators. You will understand what are iterators soon. I will slowly explain that. Okay. There is one very familiar terminology that we use in DAX, which is the term called iterator. Iterator comes from the word iterate. To iterate means it's to loop, to repeat. Okay, that's called iterate. Iterate is to repeat. So, like for example, if I were to repeat my statement again, I usually would say, let me reiterate. Okay, so iterator means they are going to repeat the same calculation over and over again. Now, how many times? Over again. Depends on the number of rows. Okay, so like I said, you can imagine in your head, if I got a table, let me show you a table. Let's say, for example, I show you the sales table here. Okay, let me erase all this. Let me click the sales table. Not here. I will go to data view. I will show the sales table. So this is my sales table. A lot of figures here, right? So scroll all the way to the right-hand side, the end. So many different pricing and numbers, So this is in fact a fact table. This is a real fact table with all the figures, the numbers here. So most of the time, right, all our calculations will be focused here. Now, at the top portion here, where you can see, this is the calculation group. You see, I can see measures, I can see column and table. Exactly the three objects that I've mentioned to you. All new here. Okay. And you guys might be asking, sorry, excuse me, what about the quick measure, the one with the thunderbolt, the lightning flash here? Well, they're still a measure. New measure, quick measure, well, it's still a measure. Quick measure is to allow you to quickly create a measure. That's why I call it quick measure. Quick measure, right, is not the brother of Quicksilver, right? But quick measure always means you can produce a measure without having to write your DAX manually. Select a template, they will generate the formula, but only a handful of popularly requested training calculation. But new measure is usually what we do. That is why the icon is the same with the calculator. All right. But you can, of course, look at a sample of a column. Let's start with talk about column. This is a column. This is also a column, right? Many, many columns. And you can see every row has a value. So if you can imagine, if you produce a new column, whatever formula you write on the formula bar, this red color here, this is a formula bar. We're waiting for it to be activated. right? Just like Excel, formula bar right at the top. There's a check, there's a cross. Cross is when you cancel, check if you want to submit. Very rarely people go and bother and click the cross or click the check because the check is the same as enter. The cross is the same as escape key. Escape is to, abort, terminate, undo, discard. The check here, which is enter key, to confirm, right? To submit. So that's the same design of the formula bar equal to Excel. So this formula bar, whatever you type in there, okay? Now, you will need to understand that the formula will be calculated across the board. Now, my sales table here, how many rows do I have? Right at the bottom here, they mention here, see? Right at the bottom here. 121,253 rows. So if I produce a column, whatever formula I enter, they will be calculated 121,253 times. They will produce 121,253 values populated and stored in the column. That is why your file size, logically speaking, will expand, will grow. Okay? Measures, on the other hand, don't do that. Measures, right? Usually, the answer, the result of a calculation is to produce a singleton value. When I mention a singleton, the word singleton is, is not the name of a whiskey or whatever it is, right? So, singleton, actually, sorry, let me not write here. Let me write at the top here, okay? The term singleton, which is the same spelling as the whiskey, but it actually means also another word called scalar. Scalar values, singleton values, similar meaning, okay? Maybe some of you guys have already seen scalar. Scalar means one value, okay? What do you mean by one value? I don't understand what is one value. Okay, let me give you an example, all right? Sum function. If you use the sum function, sum one column, the whole column 1,000 values. When you apply a sum, what do you get the answer? It's the grand total, right? So that grand total is a single number. I don't know how many digits there. I don't care, but it's a number, right? One single value. So that's a scalar value. You use average, you min, you max, you count, whatever. Any application of a DAX function, most of the time will give you and produce a single value, a scalar value. So measure can hold one scalar value. All right. Whereas a column are expected to have to hold multiple values. So depending on what formula you write in the column, usually we write a formula that will produce multiple values. Those are called iterator. Even if you use a function, they are iterators. Now let me begin this. All aggregate functions that you know of in your life, again, sum, average, min, max, count, all that, standard deviation, variance, median, all these functions, aggregate functions, they are all using iterators. They iterate. So iterator means they will iterate across all your rows. Your table 1,000 rows, very fast. Very fast. They will iterate and loop through 1,000. But compared to your table got 1,000,000 rows, well, performance slightly slower. 10 million rows, again slower. So usage of iterators, right? Somewhat it's going to be on the disadvantage side. Compared to the opposite, right, of iterator is using set logic. Set logic means the calculation happens faster because they take the whole set, a data, a result set, right, and calculate upon the set. So a big batch of total number of rows, right? Usually after we apply a filter, let's say, for example, you filter the table with a condition, all right? The filter condition will be evaluated. Maybe in 1,000,000 rows, the result of the filter are 50,000 rows only. 50,000 rows gets filtered, satisfy the condition of the filter. Out of total 1,000,000, 50,000 rows now considered a filtered set. It's the set of rows That was a result of the filtration. So, but that set of rows, 50,000 rows, right, can then be passed over to a function to perform your calculation. That calculation, you will see soon, there's one function, a super extreme, ultra powerful function in the whole universe of DAX, which we call it as calculate. The function is called calculate. I will introduce you soon. You will see that in action. Okay. Now I'm just doing my normal lecturing. I'm just bringing you to a journey, explaining to you all the way. So calculate function is the most used function across the board in DAX. Some people start asking me, huh? You mean what? The function is called calculate? So what is it calculate then? You say the function is called, like for example, the function called sum is to sum. Yes, I know it's to sum. But okay, like average is, yeah, I know, I expected it to average. But you say the function is called calculate. Calculate what? What is it going to calculate? All right. So when you talk about calculate, it is going to calculate any expression that you supply in. The calculate function, right, is so flexible, is so diverse. It is used, right, to calculate whatever expression you want to calculate. But the most important thing, they apply a filter. Now, lastly, before we start doing some simple exercises, before we start that, I would like you guys to understand, okay, that in Excel, you have sum. You know what is sum? You also have a function called SUMIF. Now, those of you who are expecting to see SUMIF in DAX, I'm so sorry. I got to apologize on behalf of Microsoft. I shouldn't be apologizing in the first place. Microsoft should apologize to you. Okay, but anyway, there is no SUMIF. There is no SUMIF. A lot of you guys will say, oh, disappointed. SUMIF is good. I want to sum only when if this condition is met. You know SUMIF in Excel. Sum is to sum everything, doesn't matter. But sum if you must meet a condition, the criteria, then only it will sum. So what about index? How do we do sum if? The notion of sum if. We don't have a single function called sum if index. Rather, we need to apply two functions. The sum function, and then within the sum function, maybe a filter function. So it's a combination of filter first, then sum. So sometimes writing DAX formula can be very long, very painful, because you need to embed multi-level functions within one gigantic formula. That's the only challenge. All right. Now remember, okay, there is always the famous quote, okay, by the DAX guru. I'm not so sure how many of you guys have actually known these two Italian guys, Marco Russo and Alberto Ferrari. They are known, they are well renowned, okay, as the DAX guru. They are experts in SQL, all right? So in fact, okay, they are my affiliate in Europe, okay, because when I started training in Europe, okay, I attended even one or twice conference in Barcelona when I met these two guys. So I've spoken to these guys, met them in person, and that was my very first time back in 2016 when I practically brought in their content and deliver my first DAX training in Malaysia. And not just in Malaysia, but in this part of Asia. Because these two guys never come to Asia. Right? He has training, they do training in Europe and in North America, but never come to Asia. So I came to a deal and I talked with these guys, and I used their content, okay, and brought the DAX training into Asia. Right? But after a while, right, they kind of like says, no, we are not going to allow you to use my content, okay, to do the DAX training. So I have to improvise. I've got to, come up with my own content, right? So DAX latest version, okay, is called DAX 2019. The last version that DAX, the language was updated, was 2019. But actually, 2021, they have also introduced a couple of improvements to some of the functions. I'll tell you later. All right. So a couple of improvements, but they never upgraded the version of the language. So the language version is still 2019. So that's the reason why I do have a course called Conquering DAX 2019, because to match the latest version of DAX. All right. Before 2019, it was DAX version 2015. Okay. So the language itself has a version number. So please take note, okay, that there will be, okay, a quote that you need to understand. It's easy to learn DAX, but it is hard to master it. This is the quote by these two guys, which I totally agree. It's so easy to learn it, okay, but if you want to master it, it takes years to master it. And it takes a lot of practice, a lot of writing of formulas.